This is Doleo, an original thriller fiction podcast presented in serialized format, a chapter at a time. Written by Jared Canton, narrated by Joshua Canton, a SteadyChaos production, 2019. Previously on Doleo. I pawed at my torso, ran my hand along a series of welts and small cuts, lifted my pant leg to reveal a still swollen calf. A memory flashed and I saw the baby, reheard her cries. I recalled the grandfather's still face, the rigidity of his body, and the blood splashed across his front. I wondered if I'd grabbed him first, could I have changed outcomes? Mulled on the nature of choice, particularly my own, and how every decision we make cascades a ripple of consequence washing over our lives. Who to save first? To rush Brett or not? Could I have retreated to Dad? Escaped instead of engage? If I'd made a different choice, would I have a different life? Would I still have that man I remember, so full of spirit and goodness, explosively vibrant and alive? I moved slowly to the door of the guest bedroom. It rested open about 4 inches, and a blue light from a television illuminated my entry as it flashed bright before darkening between scene transitions. I pushed the door and let it glide open. The room felt dense with a heavy stillness. At the far corner, the back of a head adorned with thick graying hair, strong but slumped shoulders, and still arms came into view. The head aimed at the window, motionless, and beyond it city lights glimmered through the glass. The seated figure reacted slightly, slowly, then 2 elbows elevated far enough for thick, worn hands to grasp hard rubber wheels. The right hand pushed forward, and the chair made a half turn. A man's weary profile came into view. He pulled his hand back again, and then forced it down along the right side of the wheelchair once more. His body, crumpled lower half, wide shoulders, narrow midsection, traversed the final 90 degrees to face me. "Late night?" he asked. "Yeah, Dad." Episode 9. Good Intentions. With both hands motioning in unison, Dad propelled his chair forward. Since the shooting, he hadn't walked a step without the intense efforts of his physical therapist, or me. His therapy sessions consistently, predictably, excruciatingly devolved into 2 able-bodied adults propelling Dad's lifeless lower body across a set of parallel bars. He wasn't close to walking again, and that was agonizingly apparent to everyone, including him, but it was a truth never spoken aloud. Dad insisted on a manually powered wheelchair to keep his body strong, and I presume to combat the frustrations and setbacks he constantly endured in his recovery. By keeping his upper body stout, he could control some aspect of his physical condition. It gave him a say, and helped him combat the mental fatigue of his constant failings. Perhaps it kept alive the impossible dream of walking with braces. But as optimistic as he pretended to be, it was a dream, and his doctors prohibited anyone from encouraging such fantasies. Following the shooting, Dad's diagnosis had been confirmed by multiple specialists. Full or even partial recovery of movement below the waist was a near medical impossibility. A single 12-gauge slug had severed Dad's spine at the L4 vertebrae. Not damaged, or impacted. Severed. Principal Saunders had died at the scene instantly, his valiant heroism rewarded with the ultimate punishment. In comparison, I had skated, and it haunted me relentlessly. The gunshot Brett had directed my way merely clipped the soft tissue of my deltoid. I suffered no serious continuing effects, just another scar to match the one on my abdomen. The wounds to my psyche, however, had proven far more lasting and difficult to shake. "There was an incident on my way home," I said. "Everything okay?" Dad asked. "Yeah, I'm fine." "Good. You need a check?" The most inspiring quality about Gary Daniels, my dad, was that the disaster had never broken him, at least not openly. He'd spend hours in his room alone, processing his thoughts, pain, and regrets. But with me, he did his very best just to be Dad, still offering to check my body for bruises and breaks when needed. still piled high with wisdom and empathy. He never fell into public bouts of jealousy or self-pity, but still fiercely dreamt of walking, or feeling whole again. I shrugged, lifting my shirt to reveal several constellations worth of bee stings. "Do I even want to know?" he asked. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "I'll assume those aren't a part of some kinky game you're playing with a new prospective Mrs. Daniels." "Safe assumption." I walked behind him, passing the open door to his handicap-modified bathroom. I saw the flat-bottomed shower, level with a tile floor, a drain at the center of a slightly graded surface designed to carry away water overflow. The shower had a fold-down seat that he could easily slide into from his wheelchair. The shower head was handheld, but mounted on a track with 3 options into which it could easily slide at the level he so desired. The toilet was higher than a normal toilet, and steel bars bordered it on both sides like bookends. The vanity was low, offering access from a seated position. I grabbed the wheelchair grips and pushed him out into the living room. "I'm just saying, you're not getting any younger." "Dad." "Fine, squander your prime filing briefs and witnesses." "You can't file a witness, Dad. They're people." He dismissed the comment with a knowing laugh. "I'm just not going to be around to take care of you forever." "At the rate I'm going, do you really think I'll outlast you?" I joked. She used to say things like that. I wish I knew then that she was right. He paused. "And I wish you could have met her." Somehow, his eyes brightened and saddened at the same time. An empty gaze gripped his face every time he retrieved a memory of her, as if just mentioning Nancy dragged him back through wildly conflicting feelings, the joys of life with her, and the agony of that life's brevity. "So do I." God. You know, even during the chemo, she was enchanting, beautiful, brave. He caught himself, cleared his throat hard. "She wasn't the only brave one in that union," I said, but he pivoted uncomfortably. "Did you eat yet?" I didn't know what to say. I never did when he changed gears from fond remembrance and vulnerability to menial distraction in a mere instant. "No," I said, enabling him, permitting his escape from the dark place without challenge. I always let him bring the conversation back to the surface. How was work? Did you meet a girl? How was training? We talked a lot about the fact that we talked a lot, but we never acknowledged how little we truly said. We spent an inordinate amount of time together, lived together, but a litany of things remained unsaid. There were endless matters I wanted to share with him, explore, about the shooting, about my childhood thereafter, his condition, the guilt that I carried, and the overwhelming admiration and appreciation I felt for this man, paralyzed from the waist down, because of me. But we just never made it there. I wanted to push past our collective comfort levels, thank him for never pointing the finger my way, for being better than I was, but every time we came close, we fell back into the routine. We'd evade, repackage our truest thoughts, our shared broken hopes, and force them back down with stubborn denial. I let it happen again. I was thinking of calling down to James, see if he'd bring up delivery if I ordered it. I knew this was Dad's way of protecting me. I'd outgrown the need for physical protection, so he tried to shield me from the pains of our collective past. Sure, he'd briefly bring up his late wife, the trial, the way the town shunned him after the settlement, and even Brett, but he never dove into the details. He never subjected me to how brutally tragic his life had been, how it had torn him down, and still, in spite of the Denton Elementary disaster, he still insisted I was the best thing to ever happen to him. A noble thing to say, an honorable, loving man saying it, but I'm not sure I believed it. "What do you feel like?" I asked, as he fell back into a silent stare. It was where he went when he wanted to remember without pulling me down into the lonely, fortified caverns of his mind. It was where regret and pain lived, where Nancy, and in some regard, surely I lived. His face would glaze over, wash into stillness. He'd stay there for a while if I'd let him. I never actually knew if he was back with her in those moments, or running, or skiing, being the man he no longer could. I simply knew that when he went there, he wasn't here with me. Dad shook free of the trance, maneuvering himself to the front of his powerlift recliner. Several groans and button pushes later, and he was easing into the reclined position. The chair moaned a sharp electronic whir. He extended the footrest, and thin, lifeless legs rose at his front. "Chinese food?" he selected predictably. "Okay. I need to step out and grab a few things anyhow. I'll pick it up at Chang's on my way back. Can you call it in? What do you want? The usual, I said as I slipped back into my dress shoes and threw a fresh long-sleeve shirt hastily over my tank top undershirt. I accepted that our emotional breakthrough wasn't going to come today. Instead, we'd feed fried rice to our collective grief, watch some bad television, exchange a hug at the end of the night, rinse and repeat. Maybe, eventually, I'd find the courage to drive a conversation truly worth having. Perhaps tomorrow, I lied to myself. I was at the elevator well before the handicap-safe door mechanism permitted the massive door to ease shut behind me. The elevator beeped and I strode in, rotated, and let my shoulders fall flush against the cabin's back wall. My whole body pulled, shoulders down, heavy arms, tired legs. I let my head tilt back to the hard composite wall and my eyelids clamped shut. My right eyelid creased open far enough for me to observe the parting steel doors and my arrival at the first floor. My neck flexed and pushed an exhausted body upright from a lazy lean. I swung my right leg out and it pulled me into a steady gait. The accident had taken its toll. Clearly, an ability to feel limitation is monumentally different than an absence of limitations. The lobby of the complex was oddly silent, like the street outside my window at 4 a.m., a place where things almost always were, but at that time simply weren't. James's shift didn't end for another several hours, but his desk was vacant, as was the small area to the building's front where I could often see chemical-laced wafts of smoke fill the air, courtesy of James's lungs and a nasty habit. This time, however, there were no such carcinogens, no James, and certainly no Mr. Daniels seeping politely from his slightly tobacco-stained lips. For a large complex, the first-floor lobby was relatively diminutive, reflective. Obsessively polished tile covered the space, absent a small 6-foot weathered rug at the entryway. Melted snow on polished tile was slicker than a greased pig, hence the carpet. I walked past the front desk. To my left, a sudden disappearance of light and subtle squeak seized my attention. The door of the janitorial closet rested open a crack, but just moments ago, where light glowed vibrantly, there was now only darkness. "James?" I called, just inches from the handle to the exit onto the bustling city streets. No answer. I took a step closer to the closet, now 4 strides away, and tilted my head left to peer into the void between the door and the frame. "James, you need a hand?" Still nothing. I closed on the utility closet, now only 2 strides shy. "James?" Nothing. Suddenly, the door lurched open and James's limp body launched forth from the blackness. I snared the collar of his suit jacket and his arms flailed wildly. The force yanked me left, but I killed the momentum enough to slide James gently to the tile. I spun back to the open closet. A flash of navy sprang from the blackness, delivering a firm push-punch to my neck. The impact twisted my torso awkwardly. Already off balance, I tumbled to a knee beside James. My hand lurched to the floor and then flew out from under me, dropping me face first to the slick tile. I uprighted myself and positioned my hand at the front of my face. A thick crimson coating ran from my palm, down my wrist, saturating the white sleeve of my shirt. A blast of air hit me, and I regathered my thoughts in time to see the navy outline of a figure dash out the front door. He turned his head and tracked my position as he sprinted past the large windows between us. I glanced down at James, blood spilling from his neck. I pulled off my shirt and pressed it to his wound. "Hold it there!" I grabbed his wrist and guided his hand to the shirt at his neck. He nodded weakly. "Tight," I said. Then, without thinking, for the second time in a single evening, I jumped into the fight and embraced another opportunity with the best of intentions. Unfortunately, intentions don't count, only results. The wind blew my thin undershirt taut against my body. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911 as my eyes scanned the alley towards which the perpetrator had escaped. A dark shadow in a sprint curled hard to the right and slipped down for momentum. As soon as he landed, seemingly, he was back up and scampering into the void. I followed, racing his direction, a good block and a half behind. 911, what is your emergency? There's a man stabbed. I pulled a deep breath, fueling my muscles, and continued speaking as I released it. 12 Merrimack Street, Boston, the Globe Garden Building, main entrance. He's in the lobby. Okay, sir, a team is on the way. Can you... But I couldn't. Now in a full run, I ended the call and tried to dial Dad one-handed. I fumbled the transition, heard the bounce of plastic on pavement, and then a crunch under my shoe as I drove forward, inadvertently stepping onto and then grinding my phone into the asphalt. As I reached the corner, I turned to the alley. It was lined on both sides by brick and the rear doors and dumpsters to a litany of restaurants. All of the doors were closed. At the end of the alley, an imposing concrete structure elevated to the right. A parking garage. I scanned the levels, saw a large man, draped in shadow, sprint up the ramp to the second floor. "Stop!" He didn't listen. Within moments, I reached the parking garage entrance, then stairs, and immediately leapt upwards, traversing the steps 3 at a time. By running along the car ramps, the perp had slowed himself down considerably. I figured my best chance of catching him was to cut him off at floor 3. As long as he hadn't parked on the second floor and exited, the pedestrian stairs would offer a major speed advantage over the ramps. I'd catch him. I reached a steel door with chipping red paint and a large white 3 painted across its center. My lungs thirsted hard, trying to regain the advantage over my muscles' greedy demands for oxygen. I grabbed the silver handle, twisted, pushed, and slipped through the opening. Crouched at the base of a wall, I listened. To my left, a matching clack echoed through the garage, like the sound of shoes landing simultaneously on concrete. I followed stealthily as the clack changed into the alternating sound of jogging feet. The echo moved away, upwards to the 4th and final floor of the garage. I slipped off my shoes to deafen my approach and broke into a run. Parked cars passed in a blur as I ran up the concrete incline. Finally, under the night sky, the footsteps stopped. I scanned the flat, top level. Not 20 feet from me, a man stood, facing my direction, abnormally still. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, and stood almost 6 feet, maybe 200 pounds. Behind him, nothing, just air, and a 60-foot drop to the pavement below. I walked towards him. He still said nothing. The night shaded his face from view, but his chest heaved, and his arms lay flat at his sides. I dropped my shoes to the ground, stepped into them, preferring to have the protection and grip they afforded should an altercation occur. "All this for one darky?" The silhouette of a man shifted slightly as he spoke. I said nothing, opting to test his physical boundaries with a step forward. "Stay there." He glimpsed over his shoulder and slid his right foot back. "It doesn't have to end like this." I lifted my palm as if doing so would calm him. It was a naive thought. I knew nothing about him beyond the simple fact that he had stabbed James for what I could only presume was no good reason. "For whom?" he asked. "Either of us." "Bullshit." "Why James?" It was the first conversation starter I could think of, and the answer I wanted most. I'd heard in situations like these, dialogue was a useful tool, a potentially disarming one, but admittedly, I was out of my depth. I told him to let me pass, and he wouldn't. "Past where?" "The lobby." "Why?" "My bitch ex-wife lives on the 3rd floor." "So you stabbed him?" "Yes." He said it so coldly that even I felt a chill. Without another word, he turned his back on me, as if nothing I had to say could possibly impact his decision. Behind him, there was nothingness. Darkness across the horizon for at least 40 feet before small yellow windows dotted a hotel building. His right leg jutted upward, and the sole of his shoe found the top of the short wall surrounding the upper floor of the parking garage. He extended his leg and his body jerked upward. He dug his second foot into the top of the wall, and his legs bent, loading up for a jump. As he did, I acted, sprinting towards him. I closed the gap quickly and dove for the bottom of his coat as he jumped. My right hand curled firmly around the fabric as he hurled himself off the side, like a long jumper, outward, not upward. He traversed 3 feet, the coat fabric grew taut, I felt a pulling force, and his outward progress stopped dead. For a second, maybe 2, I had him, and his body careened back hard against the concrete exterior wall. The force of the concrete wall against my chest pressed the air clear of my lungs. I coughed. He looked up at me briefly, terror in his eyes, not the eyes of a man committed to the choice he had just made. "Don't let—" He never finished that sentence. The position of his arms set everything in motion. During the jump, he had thrown them forward and up to generate thrust. It had, but more importantly, their elevated position when he collided back against the wall freed him. He slid smoothly, quickly clear of his jacket. He yelled something urgent, unintelligible, and his cries faded into the night. I gripped the jacket firmly. The other end lay uselessly against the concrete wall below me. It flapped in the wind. Time stood still, and then a dull crunch signaled his body's impact with the pavement below. The sound gashed clean through the drones of traffic, horns, and empty drunken hollers. A paralyzing acknowledgement of failure hit, replaced instantly by something far worse as I pulled myself up for a closer look. What had been regret about a man that had chosen to end his life quickly became panic and dread. My stomach clenched, and my windpipe forced out a hard nothing with a cough and throaty groan. I wiped my mouth on my wrist and dry heaved again. I stared in disbelief, pulled both hands through my hair and let my elbows prop my head as I pulled fiercely at the hair at the back of my neck. No, 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 I cried in disbelief. Not 8 feet below, nor 8 feet across, a rooftop. From my previous position, it had been invisible, below my sight line. This man hadn't intended to jump to his death, but I had made sure he did. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed Doleo, please come back for future episodes arriving at regular intervals, and subscribe and rate us on your favorite podcast application. If you enjoyed this production, please visit the SteadyChaos Productions YouTube page and subscribe for more content from our production team.